Tell me how the process work for them.
If you don't know your Ikigai, then you don't have that center necessarily. Or worse, the way I see the world is influenced by those things. A father who helped me see the world through a lens of nature and being incredibly independent. A mother who gave me every book I wanted to read, and when she couldn't answer a book, asked me to look it up or helped me look it up.
What really is success from your perspective?
We're all using someone's definition of success that is so flawed that we're unhappy when we attain it.
Well, you might even succeed in that, but what kind of a success is that?
We tend to want to show the world something we are not, because then we can say, look at me, I am successful. Well, here's the problem. Why are we judging what other people think of us in the way we're asking them to? My name is Emille Bryant. I am a veteran of the United States Air Force. I was in for over 20 years, and then I retired from the military about 13 years ago in 2012. And ever since then, I have been a consultant and a coach. I call myself a consultant primarily because I really don't work with people for very long periods, up to a year. Because what I find is that when I help people, I'm really trying to give them a reminder that they have all they need to be successful. And sometimes we forget. Sometimes we don't understand how amazing our skills and tools are, the experiences that we've put together. So, as a coach, which is less of what I do, and as a consultant, which is more of what I do, I try to remind people of those beautiful elements of their being. And sometimes I teach them too, but primarily it's just a reminder, because sometimes we overemphasize the negative, we sort of forget the positive, and we always need a reminder that we have built a set of skills and tools and experiences that are amazing. So I did this in the military. I do it now. It's what I love to do. If, there's a saying, what would you do if money were no object? I'm doing it.
I love that. I love that. I say it quite often. No? I say to people, you see, in this podcast that I do, my storytelling series, if I find $1 billion on the road, I will still do this. Only that I will do it in a more bigger way. I'm not going to look for something else.
Exactly. I'm the same way. It's not about uh, working for or a specific goal or toward a specific outcome. For me, it's more like life is a process. Life is a way of being, right? And this is the focus of much of my work today. It is helping people be not just present in the moment, but celebrate where they are. Celebrate the joy of that moment. Celebrate and find opportunities. My One of my favorite sayings that I learned that I'm working on every day is, can I see what's right in front of me? And that means the ultimate form of presence, that you can see and sense everything that's literally right in front of you. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that phrase and that way of being is because much of modern society's job is to make you selectively blind, selectively numb, selectively deaf. You don't want to hear, they don't want you to hear certain
And also
things. They don't want you to
selectively
see.
biased.
Sorry?
And also selectively biased,
And
right?
so, well,
Selectively
that's the whole
just.
point of the selective deafness, blindness, and numbness, is it produces a bias that now that you can be manipulated through. And one of the challenges that I want to confront in my own life, and that when I work with clients, uh, is just being sensitive to what's right in front of you, what's right here, the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the sense of taste, the hearing and the sight, all together working with you as a whole being so that you can experience your world fully. And then You'll make different assessments of who you are and how you navigate your life when you understand that you are no longer blind to certain stimuli. Sometimes it could be poverty or something social. Sometimes it could be something personal. There's a numbness in your life that you haven't confronted, because to confront it would mean to remember something painful. But if you don't confront it, then there's an aspect of your life to which you are blind and through which things that you may not want come. So that selective blindness, that selective numbness, it becomes a pathway for things that can harm you or potentially control you. So what I want for people is they remember who they are, is to be sensitive to their environment so that they can experience everything in real time.
All right, that is lovely. I love that. And you see, before we started to record just now, I mentioned your tool. I think that should be kind of a primary tool that you use, the Ikigai. You have mentioned it in our first episode, and I say, okay, we need to have a time to sort of
Oh,
explore that and how that can be really useful for people, particularly within the business environment. Because here we talk a lot about how to improve ourselves and also how to improve ourselves within the business environment. Because first, you need to serve yourself, but most importantly, you need to serve people. So tell us a little bit about this tool that you use. What is it and why is it important for you?
sure. I'm focused on something called Ikigai, which is a Japanese word. It actually comes out of Okinawa, and it means the reason why you wake up every morning. Some people translate that to purpose. And the reason why I don't translate that to purpose is because purpose is a little esoteric. It's a little bit strange in terms of what people would know and understand, because purpose means it's out there. But the reason why you wake up every day, that's right here. That's very personal to you. So in my book, Start with a Sparkle, the first chapter is called Leap Out of Bed Every Morning. And that's because if you have something for which you are excited to wake, it is hard for you to stay in bed. It is hard for you to press the snooze button. It is hard for you to want to defer the beginning of the day. So, what I want for the people who are listening, for the people who read my work and listen to me, is I want people to want to get out of bed every morning because they have something for which passion is normal, something for which they're on the edge of obsession, and they have to have their loved ones tell them, hey, today take a break, today slow down, not because they're obsessed in a negative way, but because they have such joy for the thing that makes them want to wake every morning. When you live that life, it's hard to take a day off because you're never not thinking about it. And that's where your most inspired work comes from. It's where your most creative work comes from. It's the wellspring of inspiration, creativity, originality, and innovation. So, what we want is to link people's deep desire for that thing, what I call ikigai, the reason why you wake up every morning, to the rest of their life's endeavors, whether it's work or family or hobbies. I want those things linked so that you have a passionate reason to wake and a passionate reason to find the best part of yourself.
This is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. All right, you have just explained it, and it's really very clear. Now I'm going to pull you again. I want you to re-explain it to an amateur, somebody who have no idea what you are talking about, but
Sure.
not an expert person, but an amateur, because I'm tempted to get every part of it.
That's a very fair question. So let me go backwards in time. You'll find this anecdote in my book, Start with a Sparkle, but I'll start there and we'll kind of move forward into a little bit later in life. When I was a child, I grew up in a Christian household, which meant that we celebrated Christmas. And in my family, Christmas Eve was when the family gathered. We would all spend time. We would have a great meal. We would exchange gifts, and then the extended family would part. So my grandparents, their children, and all of their children, my cousins, would all gather. We would all enjoy. We'd have a formal gift exchange. It would be lovely, and then we would all part ways and go to bed. Now, my fondest memories growing up are when I stayed at my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve, because then I would wake to Christmas morning. And Christmas morning, I would leap out of bed and I would attack the Christmas tree. And we had a rule that every single person in the house had to be awake before one present could be opened. So, of course, I was eager to wake everybody up. My brother was eager to wake everybody up, but they were already awake and they'd have coffee brewing or breakfast coming, and we'd scramble under the tree and grab presents and open them. Ikigai is that feeling of having such intense desire to open the day that you can't sleep anymore, that you wake up and you leap out of bed and it's time to go. But more than that, for someone who's unfamiliar with that feeling, because perhaps you've never had that kind of moment, it is there's something in you that keeps recurring, that keeps coming back over and over again. And I align it with Christmas morning for those who have experienced it. But for those who haven't, I want you to take just a moment and look backwards in time. So, a lot of people, when they say Ikigai, they'll say it's the convergence or the overlap between what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and what the world needs. And that's a fair way of looking at it, but it's also, again, esoteric and a bit abstract. So, let me change that a little bit and say, can you go backwards in time? In my workbook, which is Start with a Sparkle, the workbook, right? I keep it simple. I ask you to do an exercise where you go back in time and look at your most intense experiences and memories. And the reason why this is important is because when you're looking at your most intense experiences and memories, the facade falls. Who you are shows up whether you intend it or not. That's what those intense memories and experiences do, is they reveal your true character. And in that true character, you behave a certain way. My true character is when I'm under intense pressure, when I'm feeling the most intense emotion, I look to help others. I actually seek out opportunities to help other people. I want them at their best because when I'm hurting, when I'm feeling the most pressure, my outlet for that, my coping mechanism is to find another person and help them elevate. So when I was going through my divorces, I've been divorced twice and I make no, I'm not ashamed of it. Those were parts of my life where I had to grow and learn and become a better version of myself. I was still helping others, even though I was deeply in pain. Because when I default to the person without the veneer, the person without the facade, the person without any mask, I want to help others. So I look back through my life at a thread of seeing myself do that over and over again, starting from when I went to the Air Force Academy all the way through my adulthood. My most intense experiences and memories always occurred when they occurred, found myself trying to help others. I didn't turn inward, I looked outward. And it wasn't a um, misdirection. I was feeling the pain, I was feeling the harm, I was growing, but that was my natural tendency. So, for someone who hasn't had the moment where they leap out of bed and can remember something so beautiful and passionate that makes them want to sort of wake to the day, let's go backwards. And let's find those intense experiences and memories. And let's see if we can find a thread throughout them. The thread is probably your character revealed. And there's no shame in this exercise. There are people who want to fight. We can use that because that perhaps means you're a protector or a defender. Perhaps there's someone who wants to start fires. Then perhaps we can be an investigator or an insurance investigator or someone whose job is to figure out how things combust or how things start. If you go to art, perhaps you're a sculptor, you find out that you love to use your hands to create something that didn't exist before you touched it. We don't know sometimes because we haven't examined these intense experiences and memories with the light of who we are. So what we often do is avoid them because they're painful or unpleasant, or if we embrace them, we weren't looking for that thread. But when I do this work, especially with someone who's unfamiliar with their own Ikigai, I take them back to their earliest, most painful, most intense memories, and I walk them through them very carefully because there's usually a thread of who you are. And inside that is your Ikigai.
All right. This is truly beautiful. Some because I've interviewed a lot of people here in this podcast, over 1,000 people, still
Wow.
counting. I've had the chance to be able to learn from some of the brightest mind, and this is what is happening here today. Uh, Ikigai. Okay, now let's look at it this way. You are walking somebody through this process so that you
Hmm.
can help him or her discover him or her. That's essentially what you are doing now. You are helping them to discover themselves.
Yes.
Tell me how the process work for them. What do you do? Do you like break their head and put it in there to discover who they are? Well, tell me about the process. How does it work for you? Help you work for them.
So when I'm working with a client specifically, what I like to do is I like to take them back, especially if they don't know their Ikigai. Now, if they know their Ikigai, that's different because now we're going to operationalize it. And what I mean by that is I consider the Ikigai the bullseye of your life. It's the thing that you should want to center and then put everything around it. That's work, family, joyful hobbies. All of that should go around the center called the Ikigai. That way, you're making sure every day you're manifesting that which you were put here to do, what you are built for. If you don't know your Ikigai, then you don't have that center necessarily. Or worse, perhaps someone gave you a center that doesn't belong to you. That's the part that I'm really unpacking when I work with people. That many of us, I have a course, you can find it for free on YouTube called Awaken to Brazen Creativity. And the first lesson in that course is I'm trying to help people measure what success is supposed to be. I call it the barometer of success. And many of us were told by our families, by our schools, by our churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, masjid, we were told by our social system that there's a priority in your life that if you follow it, you will be successful, you will be happy, you will go to heaven, and all of those wonderful accolades of what a good life should lead to, but those are all given to you. Did you figure it out for yourself? There's a whole lot of very wealthy people in America, specifically in Europe and around the world, who are very unhappy because although they have all the material trappings of success, their hearts are not truly in it. I'm asking a client to first figure out what it means to be successful. So that's one of the first things I'm going to ask to do. What is your definition of success? And here's the question that a lot of them can't answer. Why is that your definition? Because if they don't know why they chose the definition of success they have, then they will not be wedded to it, even if they achieve it. What happens is, as many people have found later in life, is they do all the right things and get none of the things they wanted, even though they don't love their life. So first, let's figure out why you have that definition of success. And let's see if that definition of success includes your Ikigai. If it does not, we have a major problem because we should have those definitions, you as successful and your Ikigai enmeshed. So then the process is let's figure out success, let's figure out your Ikigai. If they're not enmeshed, then we unpack why they are not. Because part of the problem is that we don't do a lot of introspection. I call myself a personal development shepherd. And that means that my job is to guide you to the pasture where your personal development will be. So, your personal development is something you do, but it's also something you kind of consume. It's a little bit different in the sense that your job is to build yourself into the greatest version of you physically, emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, spiritually. You should always be looking to grow into that greatest version of yourself. But in order to grow, you have to consume something. And so the things that you consume manifest as you sooner or later. They say in nutrition, you are what you eat. So let's start looking at what you're consuming every day, because who you are is a product of that consumption. So if I can put you in the right pasture, in the right fields, in the right spaces, in the right reading, in the right listening, in the right podcasts, in the right music, in the right news articles, begin to consume those and watch how your personal development shifts toward what you define as success. So I say you need to define success and pursue it on your terms. If we do those two things consistently, we become the greatest version of ourselves. So that's step two, step three, right? We want to know what success is. We want to know if you're Ikigai, if you know your Ikigai, we want to ask if they're married, and then we want to see if you're developing yourself on the path to your greatest version by what you consume. Are you in the right fields? Are you consuming the right information and the right technology and the right things? Because most importantly, are you thinking the right thoughts? Because your self talk is one of your greatest inputs. It's one of the greatest things you consume every day. So if you're not consuming good thinking, right thinking, and right thinking isn't what I say it is. Right thinking is what you need to become your best self. So we have thousands of thoughts per day, and a large portion of those are unintentionally negative. They're unintentionally self critical. They're unintentionally over judgmental toward ourselves. I just want to change a portion of that negativity toward positivity, but not positivity as in some boundless optimism, positivity as in what builds you toward the definition of success you chose for yourself, and making sure that's enmeshed with your Ikigai, so that as we think and grow and become the best version of ourselves, we're doing it in a very methodical and intentional way, and we're discovering who we are along the way.
Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
All right. Now, you said there are a lot of thoughts, thousands of thoughts that are passing through our head every now and then.
Yes.
And you said these thoughts are intentionally just negative. Somebody might be wondering, but where are these thoughts actually coming from, in the sense of why are they just intentionally negative? Is it
Oh,
supposed to be like this? Do we have any
yes.
explanation to that?
So this is where familial and social engineering is so critical to you have to kind of deconstruct it. You have decompose it. That's probably a better word, right? You want to decompose your family, your social structure, your place in your world. This is incredibly important to those who want to live the fullest life, because what you're learning is that the social systems we all engage in, especially from our outer community, right? Whether we're it's religion, it's Muslim or Christian or Judaism or Hinduism, that religious system imposes values upon you. And most of us, we are raised in a religious environment that mirrors our parents, that mirrors the family into which we were born. So now we have this social religious structure that's influencing how we see the world and therefore how we see ourselves. So we want to examine that. And then we want to examine the family that we came from, who our parents are. How did they come to be? How did they show up? Are they showing up as agents of a system or of a family, or are they independent of that? Or did they make a conscious choice to embrace their family heritage and their family structure? That all matters, because that's how you're thinking all the time. My parents gifted me with the ability to see the world through my own lens. They were very loving and very cautious, because I was a bright child who saw the world slightly differently. I was a quiet child. I read a lot, and I had a rich imagination. So they encouraged it, especially my mother. My father got me outdoors more and taught me how to go camping and fishing and to appreciate nature. And inside of that appreciation, my father taught me that there's joy in contemplation, there's joy in silence, there's joy in thought, there's joy in being. So my mother, who cultivated my intellectual gift and my willingness to be curious all the time. And I just got a shout out to her for being such a great mother to such a strange child. She was the one who made sure that I was fed a steady diet of information, and she didn't care what it looked like. So I actually had, at 9 years old, a complete set of the New World Encyclopedia that I read cover to cover, A to Z. I read the entire New World Encyclopedia, 1979 edition, cover to cover. I didn't read it in a year. It took me several years, but I read it from cover to cover. So when people ask me things, I know things, and they say, "How do you know?" There you go. I read the entire encyclopedia A to Z. I didn't read every word of every article, but I read every article in every book. I skimmed and knew something from every single page of that entire set. Why
That's
does this
beautiful.
matter? Because the way I think about myself, the way I see the world is influenced by those things. A father who helped me see the world through a lens of nature and being incredibly independent, a mother who gave me every book I wanted to read, and when she couldn't answer a book, asked me to look it up or helped me look it up. I went to, like I said, I was raised in a Christian household, so I went to church almost every week growing up. And my churches were more on the Black liberation element. So they cared deeply for our spiritual life, but they wanted our spiritual life to be in a body that was free from the oppression that they had experienced through Jim Crow and the Civil Rights era and before and beyond. So I'm raised in this environment that allows me to see myself as a person who can think for himself. And I was expected by my grandparents on both sides of my family and everyone else to think for myself, which meant if I left the church, they knew through their faith I would come back. If I stayed in the church, they knew through their faith I would be my best self. They expected me to figure out who I was, but they didn't say it like that. They just said, be yourself. And they had this abiding belief. This is something that I hope all people, especially those who are hearing, that they get a chance to understand that being yourself means learning who that is for yourself. Because a lot of us are being taught expectations, and we're not taught, just look in the mirror and appreciate that person. I was taught that. And so part of what I'm in my conversation with you today is just to emphasize that we have agency over who we are and how we think. And that matters more than just about anything else, because from there, we can do all things.
Thank you so much for that again. You see, you said something I want us to revisit again. You were talking about success. Because you see, I also gave some examples, no, of people who have a lot of millions or maybe billions, I don't know, in their account, and they climb up to a bridge and they jump into the water. Uh, that is something somebody should think about. Because if success is material wealth, this guy can buy anything in this world that he wants. How come he get to a point in life and he say, my life is worth nothing? Because you get to the point of committing suicide because you think you are worth nothing. Because if you are worth something, you will fight for it. Fighting for it is not just taking a gun and shooting. It's doing everything you can to say, yes, life is important. I must defend this. I will do everything to defend it. They are not defending it going to the bridge, jumping down.
Right.
Because they are losing it. So I am coming to the question of what really is success from your perspective? What do you think people should use what are the parameters to explain what success really means? Help us with that.
This will scare a lot of people because they have been taught a version of success that is very deeply linked to their self-worth. So If you do not have a outward value, a net worth of 1 million or 1 billion or 1 trillion, if you do not have power over people or over events, if you do not have prestige where people know your name, then you are not successful. The problem that I've observed in wealthy and middle class people, a little bit less in poor folks, but I've observed it throughout the spectrum in some way, shape, or form, is that we're all using someone's definition of success that is so flawed that we're unhappy when we attain it. We work and we work and we work. I remember a very blue period. You can read it in my book, Start with a Sparkle. You can find this blue period in my book where I had achieved everything I had set out to do. I had achieved everything that I was told was success. And I believed those things were success. So I put them on a pedestal and I pursued them and I achieved them far sooner than I wanted. I came out of the Air Force Academy. I was 23 years old. Excuse me, I was actually 22. I hadn't even turned 23 yet. I had a woman I loved whom I would later marry, and I had built a 10-year plan. So by the year 2003-ish, I should have done all of these things that I had said were success. I had placed it on paper. Somewhere in my archives, I probably have that piece of paper still because I keep a lot of those little notes and stuff like that. But here's the problem. In 5 years, I achieved everything I thought it would take 10 years to achieve. And it was deeply unsettling, disappointing. I was not depressed, but I went through probably the deepest blue period of my life. I had nothing for which to fight, nothing for which to go. I was double disappointed. I was disappointed, one, that I had achieved all I had set out to do 5 years faster than I intended, which meant that I was underestimating my ability to do great things. And the realization that I had underestimated myself hurt me to my core. My soul hurt from recognizing that I was brighter, more brilliant, more capable, more driven, more ambitious than I had ever thought I was. And I did it in my sleep. It wasn't even hard. It wasn't even a challenge to achieve those things that I had thought were going to take me 10 years. I had two children at the time. They were beautiful. I had this beautiful wife. She was a lovely person. And we were a beautiful family. My Air Force career at that time was going like gangbusters. I was doing great work. And yet, here I was, blue, disappointed in myself. The second thing that that period taught me was not only was I underestimating my ability to achieve great things, I had placed too low a marker on myself to achieve. I had followed the script. And I said, these are the things I should do within 10 years. And within 5 years, I had done them. So, one, I am overachieving because I have the capacity to do greater things. And two, I am undershooting, underselling myself by achieving something someone else said I should do. And I had taken classes in self recognition and self introspection and all the things that should have made me very aware of who I was. And yet, I had not lived up to my potential, and I had used someone else's markers to define success. Those two things together put me into a deep state of just, we'll call it malaise, right? It was the deepest malaise I had ever experienced. I mean, I've been through divorce, I've been through acrimonious divorce. I still, to this day, can say that was the bluest, saddest period of my life because I saw something that I couldn't unsee. And although I didn't necessarily reshape my entire life, I started writing notes and notes and notes and notes about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to manifest my future. And it took me years to figure out exactly how to do what I wanted to do with my life. Years. So that was in 1998 that I went through this blue period. It was probably a little bit after I left the military. So right around 2015, let's call it 10 years ago, that I had finally figured out how to bring all those elements together. I started my business in 2016 because I figured out what I needed to know. And what I will tell anyone who's listening, that your measure of success cannot be someone else's. It has to be yours. And you have to examine how that came to be. Why do you want what you want? Why did I want what I wanted? I followed the script, the family script. Even though they taught me to be independent, they still gave me a script to follow. Do these things and you will be successful. The independent thinking that they taught me was actually the side benefit. It wasn't the primary lesson, it was the unintended lesson. But those lessons were the ones I needed most, because those were the lessons that took me out of the very narrow definition of success that everyone had for me, for what they thought I should be in society, in family. And although in many ways I embody that success, I'm also probably one of the most independent, if not the most independent thinkers in the family. And probably among my social circle, one of the most independent and yet one of the most conservative at the same time, because I'm finally free to be able to define myself fully. I don't have to submit to one version of reality or another. I can embrace all versions of reality because I get to be all things to myself first and then all things to all people next, which means if you want to work with me, I'm a chameleon. I will probably find a way to work with you in a very let's call it holistic, genuine, authentic way. But if you were to compare that version of me with another version of me working with a different client, you might see I might be a jock or, love sport over here with this client, and over here in this client, I might love technology. And over here in this client, I might like, spiritual pursuits and have deep conversations about it. And over here, this client might like to play chess or talk strategy. And I am myself with all of them, because my definition of success was forged out of a true understanding of what I am and who I am and what I want, and being willing to submit to my own desire for success and not be scared of it, not be humbled. Oh my gosh, if I want something, I don't care if you want to be a rock star or a professional athlete or a professional chess player, or you want to sit and be a bum on a couch. My goal is to make sure you chose that for yourself and you didn't let someone else's guidepost, someone else's barometer, as I say in my course, someone else's measurement be the way you measure yourself.
All right. Somebody need to put that down. You see, that is one of the major challenges that we have today in the world, no? In that people are trying to be who they are not. And I would say, well, you might even succeed in that. But what kind of a success is that? You have just successfully become a fake.
Yeah,
Why would you want to become fake?
This is like, especially in the era of Instagram and social media, we tend to want to show the world something we are not, because then we can say, look at me, I am successful. Well, here's the problem. Why are we judging what other people think of us in the way we're asking them to? I'm going to be judged on this podcast. You've done 1,000 interviews. You understand that what I say will be listened to, evaluated, and judged by your audience. Audiences who don't know me are going to learn all about me. And they're going to say, who is this man? Is he sincere? Is he real? Is this his life? And at the same time, they're not going to examine themselves with that same scrutiny, with that same lens. See, I'm willing to look at myself first. And I use a verse out of Matthew that's my favorite one. It's Matthew 7:1, 1 through 7. But it says, judge not lest ye be judged, or the judgment you give out, you be judged with. So if I don't judge, then I'm putting myself into a state where I'm no longer judged, at least by the measure I use. This is very important to me because I'm helping people decide who they are. But I'm not going to tell them who they are, and I'm not going to evaluate who they are once they choose. What I'm going to do is ask, are you living according to the values you've selected for yourself? Because the greatest measure of your success isn't what I think of you, it's what you think of you. And the problem is, in this environment, we're not taking the time to do that self-examination. What my father calls for, especially men who are of an age, and I'm of that age where I'm in my mid 50s, where we do what he called the painful reappraisal. The painful reappraisal is when we have attained whatever success we're going to attain. Now, for me, I'm an optimist, so my best and brightest days are always ahead of me. My best and brightest life is always in front of me. I don't care how old I get. My belief is that my future is greater than my past, always. Now, let's talk about what my father was talking about with the painful reappraisal. We look backwards in time. And rather than doing some of the homework I've asked my clients to do, which is examine who you are in your most intense experiences and memories, they lament. They get sad. They get frustrated. They feel bad because they missed opportunities in their life to do something grand, to do something great, to do something they could have done. They didn't exercise their best self. They didn't discover their best self. They have a gap between who they are in their own eyes and who they could be. Whether that's a better father or a better athlete or a better sage, they feel this pain because as they look back, they recognize that this gap has only widened over the years. And what he taught me, which I was a young man when he taught me this is about over 30 years ago, he said, I just want you to close that gap as you age. I just want you to be closer and closer. The man you are and the man you believe you are, I want them to merge. And when he taught me that, as I get older, I understand more and more what he meant. He didn't mean falsify yourself to meet the other. It is adjust the belief of who you are in line with who you have been and who you are becoming and who you can be. And either you change who you are or you change your belief, or you do both. And what I began to do was become more independent as a thinker, more independent as a man, make decisions. Some people looked at me and said, why would you do that? Why would you start a business with no plan? Just quit your job. 2016, right after Thanksgiving in November of 2016, I quit. I was a very successful consultant on behalf of a small business that had a large contract with the federal government. And I made some people very upset, but I said, if I don't do this, I'll never do it. If I don't take the time right now and try, I will regret it later. I was closing the gap between who I am and who I believed I am. And I did that, and I failed miserably. Obehi, let me tell you, I failed horribly in my first iteration of business. I I'm so glad I failed. Failure is the greatest classroom of all time. And it was because I failed miserably for, I would say 2.5 years that I had to revamp my entire approach to business. And I had learned and learned and learned and learned, and nothing was working. And because I was completely out of alignment. I had created a great product nobody wanted. I had created a great service nobody was buying. It was just not happening for me. So I tore my entire business down to the nubs, down to the studs, as they say in renovation, down to the absolute barest bones, and rebuilt my business. And I had more success than I had ever achieved, but yet I still wasn't doing enough in my own eyes. So I recently destroyed my business again. This time, not down to the absolute nothing, but down to its most essential bits. What are the most essential bits of my business? And this is not about my business, it's about the journey it took for me to say what I'm saying. The most essential bits of my business are: I am a niche consultant who works one on one with clients who are deeply desiring personal growth and success on terms they can define and pursue for as long as they choose. We don't do 5 year or 10-year plans. We do a gap analysis: who I am versus who I believe I am. And we figure out why that gap exists and we begin to close it, and we close it, and we close it. And that is a very specific niche that I just decided I wanted to pursue because I was hiding behind other things. Not that I was being inauthentic, but I was trying to build a business in the wrong way for me. So I had to do that again. But I had learned so much from the first iteration of my business. I shuttered that business entirely and started something brand new. The company I own now is Go Ikigai LLC. That business has gone through its own evolution. I do speak and I do present and I do workshops and I do seminars and I do keynotes, but my bread and butter, my Ikigai, is to find clients who are deeply desiring to transform themselves, who want to define and pursue success on their own terms and do so sustainably forever. In fact, my tagline, I call myself the personal development shepherd, but my business is called the Sustainable Pursuit of Success.
All right.
And I
Let's talk about the importance of that, the importance of finding your ikigai. Looking at the world that we are in today, with everything that is happening today,
sure.
let's say also in the business environment. Okay, let's also add that we now have also a new guy in the room called AI, which make everything faster. Okay, with everything now put together, why do you think right now it is important for people to find their ikigai? Share with us.
So you call this new guy AI, is that right? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, cut it out. Yeah, you not only new, but this is when it is become accessible to everybody. Because before now, nobody actually have access to it. But if you are a tech expert, you could do that.
So here's the problem with AI, and I've worked with AI for several years, and some people will call me an AI expert, although I am not an AI expert. What I am is an AI use expert. I understand how to make the machine work on my behalf. I don't use AI. And it's not because it's not useful. I don't use AI because I know how it works and I don't want it to work on my behalf that way. So you have to be incredibly specific when you use AI. Otherwise, you run the risk of, let me use a term that you may have heard before, but I'm going to create it. I created it in some of the work I do, some articles that I've published. You're going to vanillify yourself. Here's what I mean. This guy AI has vacuumed up all of the written information the world can present, at least in English, perhaps in several languages. I don't know if it's done in say, Zulu or Swahili or Mandarin or Spanish, but I know in English it has vacuumed up all of the written information that the world has ever presented in English. We know that for sure. So it now has access to all of those thoughts and it's learning all the time. Like Grok is vacuuming up everything that's said on Twitter every day, right? And is using that to transform itself in real time. The problem with AI, the problem is that if I'm not incredibly specific about how I use it, it will spit out answers that look just like other answers from history or other answers from other users. And yes, AI can speed up manual processes. It automates a lot of things. It will actually think on your behalf. And we have studies right now that indicate people who are using AI who were not as good at critical thinking become less good at critical thinking the longer they use AI. So AI is becoming not only a tool, but it's also becoming a brain, in the sense that we are losing our independence, which is why I am not a primary user of AI. I do not want to rely on the machine for my critical thought. I want to use it to execute what comes out of my critical thought. And this is very important because if the machine is vanillifying, if it's making everybody very similar across the board. And you can see this in articles that are written by AI. Unless you are very specific, write this article in the same voice of a Ernest Hemingway, right? If you don't use incredibly specific language with AI, it will simply create a vanilla output that fits the parameters you gave it. And here's my problem. I want original thinking. I want to be a voice that is unique in the world. So if I'm using this tool, unless I am incredibly specific, and here's the problem with AI, if you're really incredibly specific and you're really incredibly creative, why not just write it yourself? Why do you have to use AI? It says, well, you got to go faster. Why do I have to go faster? What is making me go faster all the time? The speed at which I think, unless my job or my money is dependent on that speed, doesn't matter. What matters is taking the time to contemplate my thought and get what I believe is my voice on paper or on record. Now we have a different level of success happening with AI as our tool. It is taking over the world, and people are finding ways to use it in incredibly savvy and brilliant ways, and I have more power to them. But the problem with AI is that unless you are already a highly critical thinker, we run a very real risk of becoming a less critical thinker in a world that demands more critical thought, that demands more nuanced understanding, that demands more originality from human beings, since the machine has vacuumed up all of the originality to date, at least in English. So how do you, using AI, stand out as an original thinker if you're asking the tool that has access to all original thought ever recorded, at least in English, for help?
Bring in the Ikigai to that conversation. So that, because now you are talking about the originality, you're talking about you find it. I think it also maybe relate, correct me if I'm wrong, relate to what in philosophy or in psychology, I think it will be said, where is what is your locus of control? Are you having it internal or external? In that, what is your point of reference?
For
Is
sure.
it people? Is it other people, other forces other than you? Or is it an internal force of your locus of control? So in this area, I'm trying to understand how you place the importance of having your understanding or having a deep understanding of your Ikigai in a world that you have defined having a lot of vanillas where everybody is almost becoming the same everywhere.
Well, see, you ask a great question, so I'm going to use Ikigai as sort of the lever for the answer. Only you have experienced your life. Therefore, it is the most rich and reliable source of data about your future. We do not have to be victims of our past. What I say is we are not defined by our past, we are informed by it. That means with the information that our past gives us, we can make some very incredibly salient choices. We can make choices that transform our future. We can choose what the next version of ourselves looks like, feels like, sounds like, acts like. It might be completely different from our actual past self. We may adopt a new accent. That's okay if you do. You may adopt a new residence. Perhaps you move from Nigeria to Italy. Perhaps we adopt a new way of dressing. Perhaps we adopt a new religion. Those are all choices that are informed by our past. We're not caged by it. We're informed by it. Why does this matter? Because if we're going to answer the question you asked, we have to look at who we are by as a matter of choice and not consequence. How do we engage with the world around us should be a matter of choice and not consequence. So, what we want to do when we engage AI is we want to bring our informed self to the engagement with the artificial intelligence. We want our informed self to use the tool as we intended, which means I can pull out of it incredibly innovative and original thinking because it contains all of that, but it must contain it in a healthy way. I cannot ask it simply to answer a question, or I run the risk of giving it control over how I express myself because I don't want that. I'm going to learn how to use AI in a very specific way. So my prompt might take 3 or 4 paragraphs to complete before I inject it into the AI for an answer. And I may do some uh, recombinant prompt engineering. Tell me how to use you better. I can say to the AI, and the AI will take my prompt and work with me to improve the prompt itself that will give me a better answer that's more customized to me. Most people have no idea how to do that. Most people
In
don't even.
essence, in essence, what you're saying, it's not like you are saying people should not use AI, but that people should learn how to use it effectively. Is that correct?
Effectively is it, that word does too much work. Let me be very specific. I want people to use AI as an extension of their ability to uh, share themselves with the world around them. That's an effective use of AI. I want to be very clear about what effective means because what people are doing is answering the question. The problem is answering the question only, and remember, AI is not just, it's not, I don't want to call it an entity because it's still a machine, but the way the machine was created, it learns from every interaction you give it. So the more interactions you have with it, the more it understands what it is trying to do on your behalf, which means if you're not intentional, it will simply drive you toward an answer that solves that problem, but doesn't include you as part of the answer. So effective has to be very clear. It has to be an extension of the person who's working with the tool. I can give a carpenter, 2 different carpenters, the same exact tool. And because of the skill they have with that tool and the experience they bring, they're going to have either slight or significant differences in the same basic output with that tool. If I ask them to make a table and I say, make a table, and I give them a tool or a set of tools, identical set of tools. The one, perhaps he was trained in something, some sort of French way of doing things. So his comes with more curves and flourishes and embellishments. And the other one is more from a Scandinavian style of thinking. So he's going to be more utilitarian, clean lines and simple, very effective. Both of them a table, both of them created with the exact same tool set. And yet one of them differs from the other because of who they are as the user. They're still effective, brother, but I'm trying to get away from effective as an answer and get to what is an expression of the individual.
Thank you so much for that. That is really very important. And that leads to one of the last questions I want to ask you today about the Ikigai, which is actually how do we use it? The application of it, because I think you did make mention of whether you call it the usability of it or something. But in any case, we are in that space. Now, you know who you are in the very core of yourself. You know what is controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you use that, say maybe in the area of business or in your life, so that you can become a better version of yourself?
As they say in the neighborhood, I'm really gonna kind of sink my teeth into this. First, let me use myself as an example. I'm wearing a dashiki today because I love my African roots. So part of my Ikigai embraces who I am from that perspective, right? I'm an American. I grew up in America. Some people will call my family a foundational Black American family because we've been here since before slavery ended. But that's not my mission in life to define myself in one dimension, but rather to define myself in many. So not only do I wear dashiki, but I wear glasses that are imported from China, and I carry a beard. And all of these are deliberate choices that I've made in order to make myself who I want to be in my own eyes. My Ikigai is reflected in my speech. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so the way I speak English is very much a reflection of that upbringing. Again, by choice, I chose to adopt this or maintained this accent from the Northwest, even though I've lived away from it for far longer than I lived in it. I'm also an intellectual, and people come to me with heady questions and answers. So part of who I am in helping others as I express myself is finding ways that make them smile and bring them joy, so that as they learn who they are through the work that I do with them, that they find that this is not just heady work, but it's also joyful, humorous work, that we have the ability to laugh at ourselves. All of this is me bringing all of myself to every engagement with every client, but mostly to bring myself present in this moment personally. This is my home. One of the walls behind me, I have a Lazy Susan with an Indian design on it. I have another one over here that has another design. They were so beautiful, I took them off the table and put them on the wall as art. So in other words, something that was supposed to be for the table as a tool became something beautiful that I could put on my wall. That's how I think. That's how I bring myself to every engagement. I'm here to live this beautiful life where my expression uplifts my environment, my community, my family, the people that I choose to love and serve. It does all of those things all at once, many times over. When it comes to professional, this is where Ikigai gets really good and really powerful. If you can build a business or a career around that which you know you are, you will become the expert in that field, because you will use your hobby time, your leisure time to learn and learn and learn. One of my favorite thinkers in business is a guy by the name of Earl Nightingale. And Earl Nightingale's definition of success is that is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. If you know your Ikigai, you're going to pick an ideal that is worthy of your time and talent and energy. And then you're going to progressively, day by day, step by step, lesson by lesson, learn more and more and more. That is the realization of success, that you are taking something that you know is good for you, good for your community, good for your family, good for your religion, however you define good for yourself. And then you're going to begin the process of becoming an expert at it, not because expertise is required, but because expertise is an outgrowth of passion, an outgrowth of purpose, an outgrowth of the reason why you wake up every day. Now you start marrying all that together, that you know who you are. You express yourself freely and consistently in terms of your own life. You make yourself into someone who is an expert. You then apply all of that toward a professional endeavor, and pretty soon success is just going to happen. Success as you define it, perhaps success as the world sees it. Some people will see me as successful, yet I live in a rented townhome. Why? Because perhaps I don't have enough money to buy a home in the Washington, D.C. area, or the home that I would like. And then they say, well, you're not successful. You haven't bought your own home. And I'd say to them, if I'm waiting to buy a home to be successful, perhaps that's not my passion to buy a home today. But if it were, I would then organize my energy and effort, my time and my talent, and I would make that so. Because once I organize myself around my Ikigai, whatever I say I want, whatever is my priority, becomes my reality.
Thank you so much for that. And this is liberating for a lot of people. In that you put power in their hands, in the sense that you don't need to wait for another person to define for you what is success. You need to define it for yourself. With me, that you are at the driver's seat, like Enagea would put it. You are the one that is driving. You are the one that is deciding the destination. You are the one that is taking the action. If you fail, blame yourself. If you succeed, be thankful also, because you also have other elements that are making it possible for you. But essentially, you are the central force. You can choose to be on your bed, that is your own choice. You can choose to walk out, it's your own choice. But whatever action you take, there are consequences for it. If you don't want the consequences, maybe you don't need to take any action. But at least be honest that you have decided not to. Therefore, there is also a consequence for not taking action.
Look,
I want to thank you so much for this.
it's my pleasure. I do not discount that there are people around the world who have circumstances that limit their choices. I call it the menu, right? So I was born in America. The menu of options for me is different than someone who was born in, say, Zimbabwe, or who's born in Argentina, or who's born in Thailand. The menu of options that are available to me is all I have to choose from. I am descended from um, the formerly enslaved in America, Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. The menu of choices I have because of that is different than the menu of choices I would have had if my family had not been kidnapped from the continent. Those menus determine to the extent we can control our choice, our choice. But here's the thing. Nobody says that that menu is the only menu you have to choose from. At some point, we can decide to change menus. Perhaps our menu, the thing from which we choose, might not become the greatest menu of all time with everything available every day, but it doesn't have to be limited to that same specific menu that I was born into. Our choices are limited a lot of times by our environment, but the choice to change ourselves within that is never limited by our environment. So then we can grow and grow and grow. And perhaps we never leave that little village. Perhaps we never leave that big city. Perhaps we never leave that countryside or farm. But within that, if you have the ability to hear what I'm saying, you still have the choice to grow. And the fun part about this is something my father taught me. He said, if you are growing like grass does, an entire ecosystem develops. And I looked at him, I said, what? Grass? He said, just be like grass and grow. So I'm going to tell you a quick story because I want to relate this to something that I think a lot of us who are born in limited circumstances don't understand. Being like grass is an amazing opportunity. But grass in America is very bland. It's green, it's beautiful, it's lush. When I was a younger man and I bought a home that had no lawn, no grass on it, I had to get it put in. But I didn't buy sod, already grown grass. I bought this special kind of seed that someone came with the blower and they blew in this mulch and the seed and it sort of he taught me how to prepare the ground, and he comes in and he blows it all over my yard to grow. And he tells me when he leaves, he's like, okay, I put this in, it's got its own food, keep it wet, over the next few weeks it's going to take root. And sure enough, it did. And he said, once it takes root, let it grow all the way to seed. Now, this was like him speaking a foreign language to me. Like he was speaking, I don't know, Japanese to me when I hadn't learned Japanese yet. I said, to what? He said, to seed. He said, let it grow to seed. I said, no problem. So I let my grass grow, and it gets longer and longer and longer, and it gets to this unkempt sort of look. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I need to mow it. It's looking like a jungle back there. He's like, he assures me, let it grow. So it grows taller and taller and taller over the course of a summer. So he put it in at the beginning of spring, and then over summer, it grows. And then I see the seeds pop out of the grass. I see it clearly. There's actual seeds from the grass. And he says, now mow it. Set the mower at the highest setting. Do not pick up the trimmings and you have overseeded your lawn. I was like, he said, your roots are established. Your lawn is now giving you free seed to plant more in the bare spots. You don't have to do anything but mow it and keep it at that level, and it will do the rest. In 2 more years, 2 more growing seasons, I had a thick, lush, green lawn that looked nothing like the bare yard I had initially bought when I bought that home. But here's the more important part. Weeds could not grow in that lawn because the grass was so thick. Imagine that the negatives outweigh, or the positives outweigh the negatives, to the point where I had a weed-free lawn season after season without using any chemicals whatsoever because I had let the grass grow. So when my father taught me to be like grass, what he was really saying is, can you drive your roots into the fertile soil of your life? And then can you simply grow and create your own ecosystem out of that growth? Without you trying to, can you just be your best self every day and see what transforms in the life you live and the life of the people who live around you? So ever since then, especially with the illustration from my home, I've always tried to be like grass and just grow.
That's so beautiful. I'm not going to add anything to that. The message is rich. Thank you so much, Brand. I really appreciate the time and the sharing here. We have spent enough time that we budgeted for this, and it has really been very, very valuable. It has been really, really rich. Thank you so much, brother. So, how can people find you first? What is your final thought here to conclude it?
Sure. So let me do the particulars. You can find me on LinkedIn or YouTube, Emille Bryant, EMILLEBRYANT, myname.com. You can also reach me, EMILLEBRYANT.com, or you can find me on that's really all of my social medias, YouTube and LinkedIn. You can find me on TikTok as well. I'm Emille the Consultant on TikTok. I've got some videos out there, but my primary is LinkedIn, YouTube, and then my website, which is, again, myname.com. And my final thought, keeping it very simple, very joyful. And by the way, I work with clients from across the world. So if you enjoy this and you want to work with me, I am up at 2 o'clock in the morning, my time, to accommodate people in Australia or in Austria or in Germany or wherever. So don't worry about the time frame. It's on me. I'm an owl. I don't sleep. I do sleep. So enjoy. You reach out to me if you want to talk to me. But my final thought is very simple. If you know who you are, as my friend Rashad Howard would tell me, everything changes. That's it. If you know who you are, everything changes.
Beautiful. So the question therefore, or actually the advice therefore to the people is to know who they are. To the audience, know who you are is the beginning of wisdom, is the beginning of everything. Because everything really is going to change. Because now you present yourself in the world differently. You walk differently because you know the son of who you are, the daughter of who you are. You know what you represent. You know the story behind you, and you know what is in front of you. You are not scared. You are not afraid. You are not going to climb the bridge and say, "Oh, today I'm going to jump down," because you know who you are. You don't want to shortchange yourself. Everything changes.
Everything changes.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Brian. It has been really very beautiful here. And of course, you are going to come back here again next time.
Obehi, I would be honored if I could return. I love the opportunity to spend time with you and your audience. Thank you for giving me this wide forum. There's a bunch of things we can talk about that are not this. I look forward to the next opportunity.
Definitely. Thank you so much, brother, and have a wonderful time.